This is a joint committee meeting of Public Safety and Economic Development. We're here to discuss the terms of the new Axon contract for license plate readers. I am joined by Councilor Nave, Councilor Moore, Councilor Williams, President Paniagua, Joe Barry, Sue Katzoff, and Chief Trudell. So who wants to start? Chief, you want to start?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll start. First of all, thanks for having us here. Also want to thank the council for working with us on this so we don't have a gap in LPR service between our current existing LPRs and going to Axon. It's very important to us, so thank you. So I thought we'd kick it off by going over the Axon terms.
I think what we want to do, because the terms until we actually sign a contract are not for public dissemination, it would be considered attorney-client privilege. Let's just talk about in general what the product provides for SPD.
Okay, so what we'd like is these 26 LPR readers for public safety and for investigations. Basically, what the product does, depending on the install, it goes on a light pole or it goes on a fixed pole. It has a camera that reads multiple lanes of traffic. It reads cars going at various speeds, highway speeds, traffic speeds, and then compiles that data into a system that allows the police department to go back and, based on criminal investigations, search that data to assist us in solving crime. So that's the basic premise behind the LPRs and what SPD is looking for in their use.
And I would like to note, because I think there are a few points that are vitally important for this body and the public to understand. The data that is collected as a result of the installation of LPRs is data that is solely owned and accessed by SPD in the city. It is not owned or controlled by the vendor. They provide what's called a closed system, so that the data is only being transmitted to SPD for their use. So I think that is an important feature that may be of import. So they can't share data because they don't have data to share. The data only lives within SPD.
Thanks for sharing that, Sue. That is a huge concern in our community, so thank you. One question I do have, Deputy Chief, is with our crime rates, how many crimes do you estimate that we're solving because of these cameras?
Oh, you took my question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I stole this question.
So percentage-wise, I don't have a number percentage-wise. That'd be an anecdotal number. But for our major crimes, there's almost no homicides at all that don't happen to have a vehicle involved in them. So I can tell you that for our major crimes, they're used frequently. I think Axon put a number at 70% of crimes overall. Their number is a vehicle is involved in the crime. So for our major crimes, the percentage is high, and I think overall that number is pretty accurate, based on that.
And thinking about evidence in closing cases, I imagine that in order to go to a prosecutor, you have to have a number of different points of evidence. How critical would LPR data be compared to all of the other data that you would bring to a prosecutor? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think there's going to be witness victim statements, all right? And we all know how those identifications or witness statements can go in terms of that. I think this LPR data is fact-based, right? It takes a review by an officer, right? I mean, we're not just going by the read. We have to go into the system, but we're actually looking at that plate. We're looking at that car. We know that car was there. And I think what it does is it opens us up to additional leads. That's what the LPR system does, right? I think once we know that car, now we have an avenue to get into potential other people. Now we can track that car to other locations where they go into a store, or there may be other evidence, or they purchase something. We're looking at those financial records. So I think that's very important in establishing that first lead that allows detectives and officers to build from there. But it's not just the lead, right? There's a review process that takes place based on that hit.
Another question I have, and again, this is probably just to quell the public's concerns.
Sure.
You're not staring at these cameras looking for crime, right? You're going to the cameras once a crime's been committed, and you're trying to use them to solve it, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no active monitoring of the LPR cameras like our cops cameras. So this is after the fact. Somebody provides a partial plate, somebody provides a location where it occurred, and we're going in and we're specifically looking at that time frame. We're specifically looking at the location where this might have occurred, and there's no active monitoring.
Thank you.
So I think the hot topic, right? Can we talk about the legality of the data that comes from the LPRs? And this might be a joint question. If we get a request from a federal immigration agency to access that data, what that looks like on our end if they ask for it?
Yeah, so I think this came up in the Surveillance Committee's review, and absent a court order or a subpoena from ICE or a federal entity, we will not share that information.
And that's, sorry, I'm stealing your thunder.
Go ahead.
That subpoena goes to who, Sue? If they were to subpoena the data looking for person?
So because the data is owned and housed only with SPD, I can't tell you that the vendor wouldn't receive a subpoena, but they don't have the information to supply back. So they would let us know that they received a subpoena, but only SPD has data that would be responsive to that subpoena. So it would have to come through this office in order to be responsive to that subpoena. Does that answer your question? Okay.
That's the only way we'd be sharing information,
Correct,
because we'll have no other choice at that point.
correct.
With ICE or the federal entities, that's correct, yep.
And Chief, now let's, take the federal government out of the equation. What if we're talking about DeWitt or Manlius or New York State? What does that process look like?
So right now, that our current footprint is that we're not sharing information with those other agencies. We would like to enter into MOAs down the line that says we'll share with you our data, but you are not allowed to share that data beyond just yourself. I think there is value in the collective law enforcement community within Onondaga County, because crime doesn't stop at our borders, to share that information locally for criminal prosecutions. But that agreement, which we still have to work out, would be just for that agency that we're working with. There's no sharing of that information beyond that entity to ICE or to other agencies.
And I think what you're saying, Chief, is the request would have to be specific, tied to a crime on a date at an area. It's not, hey, we want to see your LPR data for the month of January. That's not what Chief is talking about. It would be tied to a specific crime that had occurred, and the adjacent law enforcement agency locally is trying to solve that incident.
And so along the same road, so in the past with previous purveyors, we had for a year or so accidentally or non-accidentally left a button on that website that was sharing our data with other agencies across the country. Can we be assured that with this new one, none of those buttons are on?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. This is an opt-in situation, not an opt-out. So as a standard, you're not sharing with anyone unless you check the box to do that. So we are assuring you that we're not sharing any of that data with the folks or the entities that you're concerned with. And I just want a point of clarification. For local agencies, our footprint would be, if we are able to, share that data so that they can go into their systems and look at our data on an ongoing basis. If that's not something that we want to do, but that would be our position, because I can assure you that with DeWitt, the Sheriff's Department, towns and villages, again, crime is so transient between our small community that if able, we would like to share that data, but to have safeguards in place in an MOA that says you guys can't share it with somebody else, that would be where we'd like to go. But that is not where we're at now, and there'll be a lot of discussions to get there. I just wanted to clarify that. No sharing with federal agencies at all, but Onondaga County as a community, I think, benefits from a sharing to some degree of law enforcement data that's got guardrails and is protected.
I want to clarify. Our data for for the license plate readers is, however, hosted on Axon systems, correct?
It's in a cloud, yes.
It's in a cloud, so they physically contain that data in a processing center someplace. If there is a data breach, what are they liable for?
It's, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that.
That would be something we would want to discuss in executive session because it would form one of the terms of the contract.
Okay, so let's talk about the numbers of LPR. So we currently have 13 in the city now. The original plan was to have 26, but we didn't get to there. The plan is to go back and have 26?
Yes, it is,
Okay.
yep. We're looking for 26.
Do we have those locations in stone?
We're looking at the same locations that were in the original
Okay. Can we get those
installation.
locations?
Absolutely.
Anybody have, I don't want to step over anybody.
Just one more. There's a lot of concern in the community about the city at all doing business with any companies that also do business with ICE. So after having discussions with you, I understand that there's very limited amount of companies out there that can provide these services to us. You guys are already using Axon for your body-worn cameras and such. So I just want to, if you could just talk on the fact that there's not a lot of other companies out there that we can go to for these services that we need in our city, which is why we are doing this.
Yeah, I think a lot of the state-of-the-art law enforcement technologies that we would like to use are going to be used by other federal agencies, including ICE. There's a reason for that, right? Because they're probably some of the best across the nation. And to limit our ability to use some of those best systems only hurts the Syracuse community, right? It's not like it's going to affect them selling that product to ICE or any other entity that we have a concern with, but it will severely limit what SPD is able to do because those technologies, like I said, are some of the best, and that's the reasons why they're used across, at what point, and where does that end? I mean, Microsoft products are used across a variety of different agencies. I just drove here in a Chevy. Those potentially are also going to be used by federal agencies, right? I think there's maybe other ways for the council, and that's up to you, but to handle that, but to limit our ability just because another entity uses it only hurts the Syracuse community from using and prohibits us from using some of the best law enforcement tools that are out there.
Thank you.
This may have already been said, and I apologize for arriving late to the meeting. Could you tell me what you use these for and what specific crimes they have been used to solve, if any?
The LPRs?
Yes.
Yeah, so we did talk about that a little bit, but
I apologize.
right off the bat, I think almost every single homicide that we have has a vehicle involved, and we have searched for those. But it really runs the gamut. I think we said that potentially 70% across the nation crimes have vehicles involved. So there is a lot of opportunity for these LPR cameras to be used to solve crime and thereby preventing crime when you take those criminals.
But specifically for SPD?
Yeah, there's no limit. It's just crimes. There's no limit. Like, we're not just using them for violent crimes. It is crimes across the board where a vehicle is involved. These could potentially be used for.
Would you also repeat for the counselor the fact that you're not watching live feeds?
Yeah.
That you're only using it as a tool when a crime or other incident has occurred?
Yeah, there's a differentiation between our cops cameras that we've had for years. There's potential live monitoring on that for surveillances and stuff like that. The LPR cameras are different. We only use the data from those LPR cameras in a reactive manner, right? So that we have a crime, we have specific information about suspects in a vehicle. We go in and search that. There's no live monitoring. In terms of the camera, we will get hits if a car goes by that's stolen, or if there's a hit on the car because it is tied to an abduction. There are hits for that, but there's no live monitoring for just the sake of looking at the camera.
But what length of time do we keep the actual footage?
Yeah, great question. Right now, our policy says 30 days. The surveillance working group, I think, had from 3 minutes to up to a year, with the median vote being 30 days. So I think that's an appropriate. We're comfortable with that 30 days.
Chief, is there a situation where you extend that? So let me just,
Yeah.
my if you have a homicide on a certain corner where you know there's a license plate reader, do you request to keep data for that corner for, let's say, let's keep that longer because we may come up on something?
Sure, that's exactly. So anytime we pull data from the system for a crime, right, we're going to archive it off and it becomes part of evidence. The schedule for the retention of that evidence follows the crime in the discovery for that crime. And that's all very much dependent on the crime. Murders, rapes, you have to keep forever, right? And then as the crime decreases to misdemeanors, and so that length of time that we need to keep that shortens. But just the bulk data that's not being used in a criminal prosecution or is for evidence is 30 days. And then after that, it follows the retention based on the crime.
So I wanted to just share the real-life example that you shared with me, the woman on the north side that was killed, I think, a couple of years ago. That was solved with cameras, right?
Yes.
So I just want to make the public aware that.
Oh, yeah, they are critical in some of our larger crimes in piecing things together.
Yep.
I think I said that, almost every single homicide, we're using the LPR cameras.
So just to be clear, so once it hits the archive, where you keep whatever length, after you've resolved a crime or it dilutes into whatever action, then those are erased at the time?
Yeah, so let me clarify
You don't
that a
keep
little
them
bit.
forever.
Yeah, I'll expand on that. So let's just take the LPR reads, and let's say on those reads, none of the data is used in any criminal prosecution for evidence. That is all gone in 30 days, anything that we don't
Right.
touch. Let's say we have a homicide, right? And a car is in a certain area of the city where it could potentially hit any of these LPRs. The minute we take that data from the LPR system for that particular crime and we move it over into the evidence bucket, now we have to retain that data for as long as is stipulated based on that crime. So once it comes out of that system, because we're using it for a prosecution or evidence in a crime, the retention of that data doesn't follow the 30-day retention policy within the policy.
Okay.
It follows the retention policy based on the CPL in the crime.
Yes. So it's dictated by state law.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I ask because I don't actually know the geographic dispersion of the cameras that we currently have and the 26 prospective sites. Is that every quadrant of the city?
Yes, it's dispersed, and it's also dispersed in intentional locations where traffic would converge, on and off ramps, major intersections, but it is dispersed, and I can get you those locations.
Are those cross-referenced with our net zero data?
I'm sorry, the what?
So the Vision Zero data, the places where people would have more proximity with traffic in terms of vehicle versus human.
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
No correlation there. Not to say that we couldn't, but I'm just not familiar with it.
Chief, I had a question. So when a constituent or anyone else shares some information with you, abandoned cars covered with snow, possibly stolen, a person, whether they send it to me, a plate or a register, and it goes to you, that stays within, right? You might share it with New York State, maybe Department of Motor Vehicles, so the information that stays within, it's not going to be.
So you're talking about any tips that we receive?
Yeah, any tips, though.
Yeah, any tips that are relative to the Syracuse Police Department stay with the Syracuse Police Department.
Okay.
If that leads into a broader investigation with other agencies involved, there's opportunities there for the sharing of it, but just the tips that come in are typically just within
Right, 'cause
house.
In the last couple of weeks, I've seen vehicles that I received tips, they were buried with snow, some had no license or registration, they may have been stolen, so.
Yeah, that stays with
hopefully,
us.
in those things, it really helps a lot of investigations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you aware of any police departments across the country that are not using LPRs?
None of the major ones.
Anybody have more questions that are non-contractual? If not, we'll go into executive session. Okay, can I have a motion to go into executive
So
session?
moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
To discuss legal advice. Executive session to get legal advice on contract terms. Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
So you're on your game.